Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. Hello and welcome to our first webinar of the year. This is with CarbonQuota, so we're really excited about this. This is the start of a series that is going to highlight how our partners are going to bring value to the IQ platform. Today we're focusing on sustainability in print, which obviously I'd like to welcome Dominic Harris to the
Rob,
stage here as
nice
well.
to see you. Nice to see you.
No, thank you for joining, Dom. It'd be great to see how you take us through the deck shortly and talking about the carbon footprint. And obviously, it's a year ago. Amazingly, is it actually a year ago now since we done our first webinar together
Yeah.
with Steve
Where's that
Lister
year
as
gone,
well.
Bob? Where's the
I
year gone?
know
It's disappeared. It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
it
Mm.
it has, but I've certainly learned a little bit more about the carbon footprint in that year, not massively. So today's going to be interesting. Um, and obviously, our customer base, I think, between both of us and is growing.
Mm.
So the message is getting out there. Would you agree with that, Dom?
Yeah, I would. And I'll come on to why that is. I think there's a very good reason, and it's not because you and I are really nice blokes, and that could be part of it, Rob. But
Of course.
there's lots of headwinds coming from legislation, but I'll cover that in a bit more detail when I go through the slides.
Okay, fantastic. So obviously, Dom, you're going to take us through the presentation today. This is going to be mainly, obviously, the hearing from the carbon quota side of things, and then we're going to hear from a customer. Is that correct?
We are, yeah. We got a little video from a customer, which is really fantastic. But it's a customer that has seen enormous benefit by using the CarbonQuota printIQ integration. So it's a very important one.
Excellent. So I look forward to that. And then I'm going to take us through a short but live demo of how we pull the data in from a printIQ quotation, how we create that, and how we bring in the data to for the carbon footprint as well. So that would be good.
Brilliant.
All right, Dom,
Thank
shall
you.
I hand across to you?
Let's go. Let's go.
Let's go
So
for it.
for those that just to introduce myself quickly, so I'm Dominic Harris, as Rob said. I founded CarbonQuota about 5 years ago with a business partner. And the premise of founding the business was that we believed that the print and packaging sector needed a lot of help when it comes to measuring the carbon footprint. As Rob said, we've had a relationship with printIQ for a couple of years now. We've got many customers that use the integration. And the whole premise of what we'll show you today is about, we will touch on how it works, but I think that the main premise of today really is just to help debunk some of the complex nature of carbon, and then how can you as a print business use carbon as part of the proposition, because it will help you grow. So that's myself. Rob, I know you've introduced yourself already. We've also got Steve Cumley on the call. He's our customer manager. He'll be known by many of the printIQ customers. So he's in the background, and maybe at the end when we do some Q&A, maybe Steve can help. So
Yeah, that'd be
let's get
perfect.
into it. So first of all, let's kind of talk about what we want to cover today. So the plan really is that, as I said just now, it's we believe that a robust carbon solution really helps drive growth for print businesses. And I'll put a lot more color on that when we go through the slides. But before we get into that, I think that we're going to look at what are the main challenges that print businesses have. There's no two ways. Carbon, measurement is a complex subject. We're going to give you a little bit of guidance and help you on some of the complex terminology. As Rob said, we've got a great case study, a video case study for one of our big customers. And then we'll have a look at the product, have a look at how the automation works between printIQ and CarbonQuota. And we'll look at that pictorially on screen. And then, as Rob said, we'll hand over and do a quick demo. And then towards the end, we'll do a Q&A. Now, so from a housekeeping point of view, we are recording this session. It will be distributed on social media afterwards, and please ask everybody, please share it wide. That all really helps other organisations that maybe couldn't join today. And as we go through, if you've got questions, just pop them into the chat. and our team in the background will be able to, help us look at them. And then when we get towards the end of the session, we'll answer as many of those questions as we can. If we run out of time, and that is possible because I can talk a lot, so Bob, you need to just keep telling me to keep on time.
I'm the
Um,
same.
yeah, so if we run out of time, we will answer them on email. So very important that we want to make this as interactive as possible. So just put those questions on the chat when they're in your head, and then we'll look at them towards the end. So let's get into the depth of it then. So first of all, as I said, we're going to look at what we see as the common challenges. And as I said, it is a really very, very complex subject. So, and what we've done is taken what we think are the six main groups of challenges that you may be facing. So, I've been doing this now for 5 years. We've had the integration with printIQ for just over two, I think now. And Rob and I spent a lot of time at shows together. We talked to lots of customers, and Steve on the call as well. He also talks to lots of customers all day long. And the one thing we have seen in recent past 12 months, maybe 18 months, is a significant increase of demands on you from your customers. So your customers asking you for information about carbon footprint. Now, 2 years ago it was there, but today it's commonplace, and I see a lot of these type of communications. So whether you're dealing with a large corporation, or whether you're dealing with a print management company, or whether you're dealing with a design agency, it's all the same. They're all asking for data. And that's one of the big first sort of common challenges, is how would you react to those type of questions? And ultimately the solution that Rob and I, we'll be talking about, that helps fulfill a very, very large part of those sort of requests you get from your customers. So that's thing one that we see a lot of. What I will say is it could be quite complex as well. And the complexity means that, mixed with the fact that there's a higher volume coming through, it gives print and packaging companies just a problem with resource. How do you maintain that continuous process of servicing your customers? And we always recommend is you partner with a third party. Now, of course, I would say partner with CarbonQuota because you're sat on a CarbonQuota, webinar. But ultimately, it's really important that you partner with a business to help advise you and do the right thing and publish your numbers correctly. And that's because leads me quite nicely on the next one. It is really complicated. It's called carbon accounting. And ultimately it's like financial accounting, but then you've got an extra layer of science that go on top of the mathematical side of it. So it is a very complex thing to do. We employ scientists, we employ developers, we employ print experts, and that allows us to be able to confidently, service our customers. But it is complex, and I always recommend that don't try to do it yourselves. I do know in the past some businesses didn't last very long. They will soon, go to market and try to find a third party. But it's because it's so complex. It's one of those subjects that really should be done by a specialist business. Then when you look at the amount of regulatory stories that you will hear day in, day out, and it does vary where you are in the world. So if you are in the EU, or more importantly, if you're exporting into the EU, you'll be coming under all of the EU regulations that have flooded the market in the past couple of years. Now, the complexity of the EU, and sadly the UK are not in the EU, but the complexity of the EU legislation is it's being translated and changed at a country level. So the EU might put out a piece of legislation saying you need to do carbon footprints of products, which is a piece of legislation, by the way, but actually each country has a slight variation on that. And that makes it overly complicated for bigger businesses. The same in Canada, you'll have a different set of laws. The US, despite Trump's best endeavors, absolutely, there is still lots of legislation in the US, and that's growing and growing and growing. Now, the common denominator on it all is that you have to have data to be able to report. Okay, so therefore, you can look at different types of legislation, but the common denominator is you need the data to report, and that's why the printIQ and carbon quota integration works. Is that it works globally? It can work in any country, doesn't matter. It ultimately comes down to is we provide very, very granular data, and that allows you to fulfil your reporting needs. And then we look at another dimension, and we've seen this a lot in our, in the years we've been going, that the businesses that invest in having a very strong carbon measurement, process in place, it actually helps them grow. And you will hear this from the case study in a moment from Darren at ARC, is that they actually won new business because they had very accurate carbon measurement, and because they use the integration between printIQ and CarbonQuota, they've won some significant business because of that. And it's becoming more and more important. The early adopters that started this 2-3 years ago have probably got a bit of a head start, but that doesn't mean it's too late. It becomes almost a prerequisite now of dealing in certain sectors that you have to be able to measure and disclose your carbon footprint. So it's a really important message that I want to portray, that it's never too late to start. It really is important. If if your competition's ahead of you or you're ahead of your competition, it's really very important to get started. And then the final piece really is that there are many ways to measure carbon. And I can't tell you CarbonQuota are the only business that do it. But what I will say is that we look at all of the standalone carbon calculators that are available in the marketplace, and they all require you to rekey data into another application. There's no automation available, and it's very time consuming. Now, I spoke to a book printer recently in Poland that was doing but they wanted to do 200 carbon footprints a day, and they had calculated they'd have to employ another 2 people to be able to key that information into a third party piece of software. So automation is everything here. The amount of work, when Rob and I first met each other and we did the initial development of the integration, we always set out that it had to be 100% automated. And you'll see that automation come to life as we go through the demo, and I'll start talking a bit more, but it's a critical piece. So in summary, on that last point, the return on investment is significant. Given the pressures are increasing, your customers are asking more data, all 6 things, okay, are challenging, but there are ways around it. And if anybody wants a conversation after this call, just drop us an email and we can talk in a little bit more detail about how we overcome many of these challenges. So that's the first part. And now I'm just going to move on to really to illustrate a point around customers. So, and I always recommend when I'm talking to a print business, the best thing any print business can do is go down your top 10 customer list and literally go onto Google and put your customer name and say, what is Unilever's carbon strategy into Google. And what you'll see is that any business of any size typically discloses that on their website. And you can see some stuff on screen now. These are just 8 examples, albeit from very big businesses. And they're 8 examples of what these businesses are expecting from their supply chain, and certainly expecting from their print and packaging supply chain. So I was at a conference recently. Walmart were talking at the conference, and they've got something called Project Gigaton. And I met the head of sustainability, obviously a very senior lady in Walmart, and they are working heavily with their packaging and print supply chain, and they insist that every single quotation they get from their suppliers has to contain a carbon footprint. Now that's in the US. Okay, so which some people perceive the US to be slightly behind the EU, certainly from a legislation perspective, but that simply isn't true. Okay, so most of the reason for doing this is coming from corporates. The corporations all have very, very strong net zero programs. Despite any political noise that's happening in the background, they ignore that. They all have net zero programs, and they all expect you as their supply chain to be able to disclose the carbon footprint. So technically, you are their scope three. I'll talk in a bit more detail about these words I'm using because they are complex. But technically, when a brand orders a product from you, their print supplier, that carbon footprint is their responsibility, and it's coupled with your responsibility. So you jointly own that carbon footprint. So somebody like Walmart, if they're buying a large amount of point of sale from a point of sale printer, they absolutely need to know what the carbon footprint is, because they probably need to disclose it as part of their disclosure process. So to summarize, top tip of the day: look at your customers, do a little bit of Googling, and what you'll get from that is a really good insight about what your customers want. And that will allow you then to approach your customers and say, look, hey, we can, measure the carbon footprint of every product we do. Therefore, please can I have some more work? In very simple terms, growing your business. So that's
So
that
Dom, can I
bit.
just
Yeah, of
ask a
course.
quick question there?
Yeah.
So just on that part, obviously from my point, I see the UK side of things growing.
Mhm.
Are you saying the US is growing equally to what we're doing in the UK and Europe, or?
Yeah, no, I am saying that, and there has been a lot of change in, obviously, there's geopolitical issues, as we all
Yeah,
know.
sure. Yeah.
And Donald Trump has been quite vocal about net zero and various terms. It doesn't impact anything. It may well impact how the government in different countries behave towards carbon measurement, which is worrying, by the way, because there is no denial there is climate change, right? If
Yeah,
anybody thinks that's a conspiracy theory, that's just they just leave the call, because we have these natural disasters. They're becoming more and more commonplace, Rob. There is a big problem, and we all need to address that problem collectively.
of
So
course.
but it does vary from country to country. So Canada are very, very progressed in their carbon strategy.
Okay.
Australia and New Zealand are. That's very interesting. There's new legislation that was launched on the 1st of January in Australia and New Zealand. Certainly the Scandinavian countries, Holland, the European countries, it's becoming more and more important to measure.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's brilliant feedback. Thank you, Dom.
So if I now then move on to kind of a bit of guidance, and here we're trying to be helpful, because as I keep saying, I know it's a complex subject. So, and I've used this slide many, many times. It just helps businesses understand, some of the main terms. There's three main terms really. So really, to answer the question to start with, what is carbon? Firstly, the word carbon is sometimes carbon dioxide, is sometimes called a carbon footprint, is sometimes called CO2 or CO2e. There's lots of words that basically mean carbon. And what they all are abbreviated to is carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide that is released into the atmosphere is the main culprit for climate change. It's a greenhouse gas that gets released and it's warming up the planet. Now, when we then go down a sort of another level, CO2e, because that's technically the right way, and I'll explain in a moment something very important about that E. CO2e is the standard measure for environmental impact. Now, everything that we do pretty much in life, you will generate carbon emissions, a carbon footprint, or a CO2e output. So whether you're driving a car, whether you're eating some beef or some vegetables, doesn't matter, it still has a carbon footprint. Everything we do creates a carbon footprint. So the strategy for big business, as you saw on the earlier slides, and even if you're the smallest business, or even if you're just a human being trying to do the right thing for the planet, the strategy is change behavior and try to do things in a lower carbon footprint way. I will talk about that in a bit more detail. So the next piece really is talking about that really special E. And it's actually one of the best kept secrets in the industry, is that E stands for equivalent. So when you say carbon footprint, What that actually is all of the greenhouse gases, and there are many of them when you move into, and I've said there methane, or when you've got air conditioning, or any type of refrigerants, they all give out greenhouse gases. But under what's called greenhouse gas protocol, which is the methodology that we work to, that everybody should work to, what we do is all greenhouse gases are then converted into carbon dioxide equivalent, E. Okay, so that's what the E stands for. It is critical that it's there, because if it's not there and you just say CO2, that's just carbon dioxide and not the other greenhouse gases. So the integration that we have with printIQ does all greenhouse gases and serves up a number that is a number that will be, let's say, 1,446 kilograms of CO2e. And that very simply is how you disclose it. When you look at carbon footprint as well, and if you're comparing two products, and we'll show you how you can do that in a moment, the higher the number, the higher the carbon footprint. Okay, and I know that may sound extremely obvious, but if you had two printed products, one on a digital press, one on a litho press, and they're identical specifications, the one on the digital press will have a lower carbon footprint because the machine uses less energy than a litho press. So it's a very important part, this, that eco design, being able to display the carbon footprint on your quotation, and we'll show that in a second. Being able to do that enables you to provide eco design services to your customers, and they will find that extremely valuable. And then the last term is net zero. Now, net zero, these aren't our terms, by the way. These are terms that are in our industry. Net zero, and as you can see on the screen, is a term that the UN dictates on, and they've set a target that all businesses need to halve their emissions by 2030. Now, that's not very far away now, and that term has been floating around, certainly in my vocabulary, for 5 years. I suspect that most businesses will not achieve that. There's slower progress when it comes to fighting climate change than the world expected. Things have slowed down slightly. There are some geopolitical reasons for that. I know I said that just now, but ultimately the concept of reducing carbon footprint and achieving some deadlines will slow global warming. So that's what the term net zero means. And again, if you Google your customers' net zero programs, you'll see a very long set of pages, web pages, that will talk about that program. And most customers have a very, very robust net zero program. And therefore, their suppliers, and certainly the print industry, needs to have exactly the same as well. I've been in print, and I didn't say this in my introduction. I've been in print since I was 16, and Rob, I'm a bit older than you. So I've
Only a
been in print,
fraction.
only a fraction, yes. But I've been in print since I'm 16, and I'm phenomenally passionate about the industry. And I believe actually with the right behaviour, the print sector, the packaging sector can show true leadership when it comes to net zero programs. So it's great, and I really encourage everybody, if you're not doing anything, you can start in a fairly simplistic way. So how am I doing for time, Rob? Am I okay?
Yeah, you're just about all right, Dom. Speak a
Yeah.
little bit quicker if you can.
Okay, fine. I'll go a bit quicker. So this slide really brings up, it just kind of brings it to life a bit. And what I've done, first of all, is just shown you some examples of typical things that most people eat or do in their lives. So we all know flying's bad. Flying's bad for the environment. We all do it. There's not really a solution, but you can see there, to get some contextual numbers, you can see that a flight to Hong Kong is 3.5 tons of CO2e. And then you can see the other bits. Avocados, beef is actually quite bad for the environment. Milk is quite bad for the environment. And driving, that's a typical, combustion car. But clearly, if we transition to EVs, that number will be zero emissions from the tailpipe. So, and then when I bring that to life in relation to the audience today, when you look at it through a printed product lens, and you can compare it to the set of numbers above you, you can see that many of the products that I'm sure the audience produce on behalf of their customers, they have a very large carbon impact. Okay, so having the ability to do a carbon, some sort of eco design, having the ability to reduce that carbon footprint will have a big impact on climate change and will be very much welcomed by, by your customers. And then when you look at it through a lens of a manufacturer, a factory, a type, type of businesses, a big converter, a big printing company, that's 42,000 tons a year. And that's largely from their energy. They may have some gas, they may have water cooling, they'll certainly have some vehicles, and that's a very average number, but it gives you an idea of the scale of our industry. And even a small printer is still 2,000 tons. So our industry has an environmental impact, and this kind of illustrates it has an impact. So therefore, we should all be trying to help it. So then when you look at even businesses that are non-manufacturing businesses, so an agency or just an office, they still have an environmental impact. They still have lights, they still have air conditioning, they still may well use gas. Even a warehouse uses gas, probably has some sort of heating, has some forklift trucks. So everything has an impact, whether it's your personal life, whether it's what the products you're producing, or whether it's how you're managing your factories or your operations. And then that leads me quite nicely on to just try to debunk some of the terms. Now, I could spend the next 5 minutes talking about scope 1 and 2 and GHG protocol. It's just very complicated, and I can be boring. You don't really want to go to dinner with me. I'm quite boring about carbon. So, but ultimately, we look at carbon through three lenses. Yeah, the first one is the operational lens, often called scope 1 and 2. Very, very straightforward to do. We've got a piece of technology that does this, but it's the best place to start for any organization. And that is because you can control what's happening in your factory. You choose what presses to buy when you buy new presses. You choose what cars, what vehicles to use. You choose what type of electricity you buy. You can influence it. And then on the far right-hand side, there's what's called supply chain carbon footprint. That is very complex, it has to be said. But that is what your customers will be focused on when they talk to you, because you're part of your customer's supply chain. So it is a very important part for print and packaging businesses to get the handle around the supply chain carbon footprint. But then the piece in the middle is the most complicated piece. And that's the piece that the integration between CarbonQuota and printIQ satisfies, is that it's the product carbon footprinting. So it takes bits of the information on the supply chain, bits of the information on the operational carbon footprint, and it calculates it into the thing that you've made. And it's a really critical part, because that's the piece that your customers will be asking for nowadays, is what's the product carbon footprint of that banner you just produced for me? And that's what the printIQ and the CarbonQuota piece does together. So then, just very quickly, just conscious of time, why is it so important? And there are four lenses here. I've spoken a lot about customers. I don't need to repeat that, but the customers are pushing hard. But there's also the reason why they're pushing hard is because it's their consumers, especially in the packaging sector, especially, and that's a really big sector in packaging, that consumers are savvy now. Consumers want to know that the products they're buying have a minimal environmental impact. I've got a 19-year-old daughter and a 23-year-old daughter. Absolutely, they think about that every time they make a purchase. So that consumer behavior pushes the customer behavior. And then you've got the regulatory side, which I've spoken about, is growing. I will repeat that. It's more and more is coming. So it's really important to get prepared, for regulations that is coming. And then risk-wise, there will be fines. There certainly is some taxes that are coming through. We're seeing it with something called CSRD. That's a piece of law that's been launched in the EU, that if you export certain types of products or you import it into another country, there is a tax implication if you don't disclose the carbon footprint. So, and I believe that's the beginning. There'll be more taxes coming in relation to carbon. So that kind of hopefully sets the scene for you and gives you a bit more insight about what carbon is all about. Now we can just move on, and I can have 5 minutes, have a glass of water, just to listen to, one of our customers. So a little bit of background. So Rob and I met Darren at ARC 2 years ago, Darren, 18 months ago.
With Darren,
Uh,
I think, yeah, it's got to be 2 years ago now. We
Gotta be,
started
yeah.
to work with
Yeah.
Darren and Ricky and the team there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's ARC. They're also Riot Color in the US. They're mainly a large format printer. They produce significant amounts of materials for retail shopping centres, for building wraps, for the floor graphics, signage, and that's a very, very important market when it comes to carbon footprint. So I'll press play. I'll let Darren say a little bit more, and I'll pop back in a second.
Thanks, Dom.
Initiatives and CarbonQuota and our partnership with CarbonQuota is all about what we want to do as a business, the difference we want to make around the products we use, our own environmental ESG policies, and obviously our carbon emissions. Our goal here is to make our customers better versions of themselves, and also take some responsibility for our business and obviously the environment around us. We are passionate about this. This isn't something we're doing to tick a box, because if we don't do this, clients won't use us. As a business, we've sort of looked at ourselves and said, what do we want to do? And this is very, very important to us to have those initiatives and finding the partnership that is CarbonQuota. CarbonQuota have been and are a fantastic partner to us. We wanted someone that we could work with that clearly understood our goals and our objectives, but also holds us to account in what we're trying to achieve. And we believe we've found the best partner in CarbonQuota. I think the main outcomes and the business impacts of using CarbonQuota services and the carbon footprint tool is immense. Again, I spoke a moment ago about what we'd like to achieve as a business and trying to make our customers better versions of themselves. For us to populate an estimate and every document that we have in our printIQ system using CarbonQuota's footprint tool to say, dear customer, you've asked for an estimate for a particular product. Here are the emissions for us to produce that product. And those emissions, of course, are based on obviously our operational carbon footprint and also that product information. So here are the emissions, but also here's a second estimate that actually shows far lesser emissions by using far better products. So again, what we're doing, we're asking that question of our client, and it's a massively important part we're finding of the buying sort of structure and strategy of our clients. Everyone is getting more and more environmentally aware. Some of the bigger companies we're working with have huge ESG policies and goals, and they're saying they don't have any other suppliers in our print space that are asking those sort of questions. We've been hugely successful in the last year in winning 2 contracts from customers. We as a business, and I'm sure it's actually right across the print industry, don't traditionally get or receive contracts. We've won 2 contracts, one from a very large PLC, another from a very large company as well, where we were told that we cannot sit here and say that the only reason we won them is because of our own ESG and our policies. But we've been told by both of these companies who are in different spaces in terms of what they do, that our ESG that we have as a business and our commitments and our policies we signed up for alongside CarbonQuota has made a big difference in terms of the scoring of that contract award. Not only that, what I mentioned a moment ago about using CarbonQuota's products, carbon footprint tool, and challenging our customers to be better versions of themselves was a big influence in contract award. So we've absolutely got hard evidence that this has been a game changer for our business.
Brilliant. So yeah, that's Darren. He's the head of sales and marketing at ARC, which is part of Riot Color as well. So you've heard there firsthand from a customer that is getting enormous value out of this.
Yeah, very strong customer, Dom, I think, for both of us. So clearly getting the value there, Darren.
So then finally, I think it's the final part for me before I hand over to you, Rob. So I just wanted to kind of talk through just quickly, because we are running out of time actually. So how does it work? That's the the big question really. So the most important message is you continue to use printIQ in exactly the same way as you do today. So you input a specification into printIQ, but all the magic happens in the background. So when you input that specification, the specification then sends us a data, and printIQ sends us a data package into our secure servers, and that enables us to look at that specification, the machine time, the ink, the type of materials, the delivery address, all of those parameters. It allows us to look at that in finite detail, and it allows us to apply a carbon footprint. And that carbon footprint is then sent back straight back into printIQ and then displayed within printIQ. So that's taken me 15, 20 seconds to explain it. It actually takes 0.2 of a second for it actually to happen. So when you put, from putting the specification in, hit save, it happens automatically. And what you get is this display within the printIQ interface that shows you the carbon footprint. You can see it on screen there. Now, having the data within printIQ is critical because you can use it for other purposes. And this screen here is a great example. On the right hand side, I think that's my right hand side, you can see that one of the most important parts is when you're submitting your estimate to your customer is having the carbon footprint next to the price. And that's something Darren said in the video just now, is that when you submit your pricing into your customer for approval, it is so powerful to be able to give 1, 2, or 3, or even more options that say, if you consider this slight variation of the specification, we can lower the carbon footprint. And there are very few customers, in my opinion, that would say no to that. So it's deliberately very simple. There's lots of very, very important, intelligent stuff happening in the background, but ultimately you don't need any training. You don't need to spend any more time on it. You just continue working in the same way, and that gives you automatic carbon footprinting. So, and that's the beauty of this. It's really very simple indeed. So, Rob, do you want to add anything to that before we jump into the
Yeah, I
demo?
mean, I think it's probably best if we just jump into demo here, Dom. So if you don't mind,
Yeah, I'll stop
stop
sharing. I think
sharing and I can share away. There we go. There we go. Have you got me there, Dom? Can you see that okay?
I have. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'll quickly run through exactly how we would set up a quotation via IQ, and we would send the call into CarbonQuota. So I'm just going to create a simplified quotation inside IQ. There we go. Let's just put a customer name in. We can choose from our simplified what we want to do. So we do commercial printing. Offset booklets would obviously be a good one. We'll just do a self cover. And this will allow us to do our drop downs to create our quotation. There we go. So we've got our size, our stock, our colors that we want it to be, how many pages the brochure is going to be, and if we want a soft proof as well. So as soon as I go away and get a price, this will create that price into the quotation for us. There we go. That's done that. So I can complete this order by checking out. And at this point, it brings me through to what is the summary page. And we can start to see where our calculation is going to be pulling through from. So all I need to do is click this calculation. That's going to fire off to, there we go. That's so fast, Dom.
Yeah.
So we've got our carbon footprint there. That's now showing us what we've got. That stays as a history within IQ. And then if I open up the actual quotation itself, just take a few seconds to open this into Acrobat. There we go. And that's pulling through all the pricing, and it's pulling through our carbon footprint as well. So it gets giving you all the detail you need. And again, we could brand this accordingly to how you want this to be shown on your quotation. So very simple, very easy, very fast connection from IQ to CarbonQuota. So hopefully that gives you an insight of the speed of that. So I just stop that share there, Dom,
Brilliant.
and I'm back with you again.
Good. So I think we've got another 3 minutes. Was it? Yeah, about another 3 minutes or so, isn't it? So should we just go into the Q&A, Rob, quickly? I don't know.
Yeah, we've got a few come through actually, Dom.
Okay. We'll clean them,
What is the process to set up the integration?
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good question. So it's very straightforward. You either contact printIQ or you contact CarbonQuota.
Absolutely.
And either of us can instigate it. But what actually happens is our relative tech teams need to
Yep.
activate the integration, and it gets activated very quickly. So it's something that can be done very quickly. You will contract directly with CarbonQuota, and that's quite normal. But it's just contact your printIQ account manager or contact one of my team, and it can be done in a matter of hours.
Okay. And do you need data for that, Dom, or is that just pulling through automatically? How does that work?
Yeah, no, well, we have two products, and I won't go into the intrinsic details of them, but the standard product, which we call Carbon Connect and you call Carbon Connect, can literally be turned on. So there's no implementation. It literally can be just turned on.
Just
We
turned
do
on.
we do go through a testing process. So in the first week, we
Yep.
monitor performance, and that just irons out any analogies in the data. It's not how you work or how we work, just make sure the data is correct. But in the first week, we call it warm-up week. We will check it.
Got it. Okay. And I think you answered this question earlier. Any training needed? Doesn't look like it.
No, as long as they can use printIQ,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's like plug and play.
it's plug and play. Yeah, no, absolutely, it's plug and play.
Brilliant. Thought so. And you just explained the timeline. We had another question there. How long does it take to implement? Very
Yeah,
quickly.
very quickly indeed. Yeah.
Onboarding process, training the staff we don't need. That's another
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
What kind of support ongoing, Dom? Is there, if
yeah.
there's problems, obviously get in touch.
Yeah, so different customers buy different services. So if it's just the integration, that's a software license. But customers often do need help. So then we can enhance different services, and certainly with ARC, we provide quite a lot of services for
Sure.
them. And actually, a question has just popped in from Jane, and she's asked the question around how does the electricity feed in, the type of electricity they buy, how does that feed into the carbon footprint? Now, that's a great question.
It
It's
is.
really very important to source the right type of electricity. There's things called REGO certificates. That's a very UK centric answer. But basically, it proves that the energy you're buying is a low carbon energy. Now, it's suddenly got very complicated. Great question. I've suddenly got very technical, but ultimately, that's why we can help people through these very complex subjects.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dom. And then last question is, how are other printing companies using integration to win new business? Bit like ARC, isn't it?
Yeah, no, and we see it. We see it a lot in the book market. Okay,
Okay.
the publishing market. We see a lot in point of sale marketplace. So certainly in the European market, many of the large point of sale printers, they have to do it because their customers demand it. So,
Right.
but yeah, a lot is happening a lot.
Brilliant. Well, I think that probably brings us to a close there. I mean, Dom, I'm sure you agree. If other people have got further questions, we're happy to answer those. We can
Absolutely.
take a phone call, jump online, or we can do it via email. I know we'll both be very happy to do that. Massive thank you to you, Dom, for spending the time to put this together and to take the IQ customer base or some of us through this today. I've learned a lot again, definitely. So really big thank you.
Brilliant. A big thank you for me as well, Bob. It's always absolute pleasure to be around you. You're such fun. So thank you for allowing us to do this. And yeah, like you say, any questions, just pop them through. I think one has just popped in actually, so we'll respond to that
We'll respond
offline.
to that. Brilliant. Thank you,
Brilliant.
Dom, and I'll speak to you very soon. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
everyone.
everybody. Bye bye now.
Thank you.